let me ask you a question. Which came first, the egg or the chicken? I'm not here today to discuss religion or biology, but I am here to ask a question which is kind of similar in the language and linguistics field. Oh, crap. Okay, so the question in the linguistics field is, does the language that we speak influence the way we think, or do we think without language? So I'm going to be informing you on the elements of language and on its relationship with the way we perceive our reality. I myself am a psychology major, and I study this communications class and child psychology. In both classes, I study a little bit on both aspects of this viewpoint. We all speak language also, so it's a little important for us to know a little bit about it. I'm going to be telling you about the definitions of language, the elements of language, how language shapes our reality, and how it does not shape our reality. With that being said, let's begin. Okay, before I can begin, I first have to tell you what language is. Language originated in Latin, and it was actually tongue, and then it got changed by the old French to langue, which is also tongue, but it's also like kind of more informal definitions for language. And then it got changed to language, which is more like what we use today, and now it is language. Some of the more formal definitions for language, according to the Britannica Academic Encyclopedia on Language, language can be defined as a system of spoken, manual, or written words in which the humans express themselves. Some philosophical viewpoints on what language is. According to Indian grammarians, language can be described as the soul apprehending things with the intellect and inspires the mind with the desire to speak. And according to Aristotle, language can be described as the representation of the experiences of the mind. Now that I've told you what language is, I'm going to tell you how we study language. I got this image from the University of Washington's webpage in their linguistics field, and then the following information I got from the Funk and Wagnall's New World Encyclopedia. So we study the phonetics of language, which is how we pronounce words. We study the semantics, which is the truth to the words, kind of like metaphors and satire and stuff like that also. We study the syntax, which is the sentence structure to make a sentence, the rules to it. We study the morphology, which is like the study of the words itself. We study the pragmatics, which is like the context of what we're talking about. And we study the phonology, which is like the short distinctive sounds at the ends and beginnings of sentences. So we study the sounds, the structures, and the meaning of words and languages. Now that I've told you how we study it, let's look further into how language shapes our reality. From this viewpoint, language is limited by the vocabulary and language that we speak, which limits the way we perceive and think about things. From the Frankish king, Charlemagne once said, "To have a second language is to possess a second soul." From this viewpoint, each new language is a new perspective, so it's separate and is limited by the languages that we speak. I also ran across this cognitive scientist by the name of Lera Boroditsky, and this was on YouTube on a TED Talk that I found. Well, this could be hard to get the time right. I couldn't figure out how to get to start at the right time.
You gotta advance it, it's okay.
And this is about a little culture she studied in Africa and how she studied their language.
In Pomporal at the very west edge of Cape York. And what's cool about Kuuk Thaayorre is in Kuuk Thaayorre they don't use words like left and right. And instead everything is in cardinal directions, north, south, east, and west. And when I say everything, I really mean everything. You would say something like, oh, there's an ant on your southwest leg. Or move your cup to the north-northeast a little bit. In fact, the way that you say hello in Kuuk Thaayorre is you say, which way are you going? And
And there are a lot of different cultures such as those that use different ways, like directions. They don't have words like counting numbers like we do. And then we have the Russians who they don't have like a color spectrum. They don't have all these different words for like all the different shades of blue that we have. So they've got light blue and dark blue, but they're still able to distinguish like all the different colors. Okay. And then she goes on to discuss how they greet each other, how they measure space and time, the presence or the absence of counting numbers or words, how people distinguish color, and there's also the grammatical gender of language, like the way people describe, like say they've seen a bridge and like the Spaniards would describe it as like strong, or they would describe it as beautiful and elegant, but then the Germans would describe it as being strong and stuff like that, where we give stuff genders. These two viewpoints show us how language limits the way we view things. And now I'm going to show you the opposing viewpoint that language does not limit how we see. I'm going to begin with the quote from Shakespeare where he had Juliet say to Romeo, "What's in a name? A rose by any other name would still smell as sweet." From this viewpoint, the words we have for things don't really make them, they don't really limit or change things. Just because of a name, it still is what it is. We also have the pre-linguistic infants, and an infant is actually someone who can't yet speak. And according to Britannica Philosophy of Language, infants can solve complex problems which indicate real thinking and suggest the use of systems of representation of the world encoded in non-linguistic form. So infants can think without having language, and that has been proven. And we have all these other cultures who just don't have words for things, and they're still able to function and distinguish things from one another. So I've told you about what language is, how we study it, how it shapes our reality, and how it does not shape our reality. According to the Philosophy of Language in Britannica, there are about 7,000 languages worldwide. And according to those who believe that language shapes our reality, that's 7,000 different ways to view the world that we live in. And according to the viewpoint that language does not limit or shape our reality, then there is no limit to how we view. Thank you for listening.
Great.